Mr. Harrigan's phone. My hometown was just a village of 600 or so, and still is, although I have moved away. But we had the internet just like the big cities. So my father and I got less and less personal mail. Usually all Mr. Nadal brought was the weekly copy of Time, flyers addressed to occupant or our friendly neighbors, and the monthly bills. But starting in 2004, the year I turned 9 and began working for Mr. Harrigan up the hill, I could count on at least 4 envelopes hand-addressed to me each year. There was a Valentine's Day card in February, a birthday card in September, a Thanksgiving Day card in November, and a Christmas card either just before or just after the holiday. Inside each card was a $1 scratch ticket from the Maine State Lottery, and the signature was always the same: Good wishes from Mr. Harrigan. Simple and formal. My father's reaction was always the same too: a laugh and a good-natured roll of the eyes. "He's a cheapster," Dad said one day. This might have been when I was 11, a couple years after the cards began arriving. "Pays you cheap wages and gives you a cheap bonus. Lucky devil tickets from Howie's." I pointed out that one of those 4 scratchers usually paid off a couple of bucks, and when that happened, Dad collected for me at Howie's, because minors aren't supposed to play the lottery, even if the tickets were freebies. Once, when I hit it big and won $5, I asked Dad to buy me $5 more scratch-offs. He refused, saying if I fed my gambling addiction, my mother would roll over in her grave. "Harrigan doing it is bad enough," Dad said. "Besides, he should be paying you $7 an hour, maybe even $8. God knows he could afford it. $5 an hour may be legal, since you're just a kid, but some would consider it child abuse." "I like working for him," I said, "and I like him, Dad." "I understand that," he said, "and it's not like reading to him and weeding his flower garden makes you a 21st century Oliver Twist, but he's still a cheapster. I'm surprised he's willing to spring for postage to mail those cards, when it can't be more than a quarter of a mile from his mailbox to ours." We were on our front porch when we had this conversation, drinking glasses of Sprite, and Dad cocked a thumb up our road, dirt like most of them in Harlow, to Mr. Harrigan's house, which was really a mansion, complete with an indoor pool, a conservatory, a glass elevator that I absolutely loved to ride in, and a greenhouse out back where there used to be a dairy barn, before my time, but Dad remembered it well. "You know how bad his arthritis is," I said. "Now he uses 2 canes instead of 1 sometimes. Walking down here would about kill him." "Then he could just hand the damn greeting cards to you," Dad said. There was no bite to his words. He was mostly just teasing. He and Mr. Harrigan got along all right. My dad got on all right with everyone in Harlow. I suppose that's what made him a good salesman. "God knows you're up there enough." "It wouldn't be the same," I said. "No? Why not?" I couldn't explain. I had plenty of vocabulary thanks to all the reading I did, but not much life experience. I just knew I liked getting those cards, looked forward to them, and to the lottery ticket I always scratched off with my lucky dime, and to the signature in his old-fashioned cursive: "Good wishes from Mr. Harrigan." Looking back, the word ceremonial comes to mind. It was like how Mr. Harrigan always wore one of his scrawny black ties when he and I drove to town, even though he'd mostly just sit behind the wheel of his sensible Ford sedan, reading the Financial Times while I went into the IGA and got the things on his shopping list. There was always corned beef hash on that list, and a dozen eggs. Mr. Harrigan sometimes opined that a man could live perfectly well on eggs and corned beef hash once he had reached a certain age. When I asked him what that age would be, he said 68. "When a man turns 68, he said, he no longer needs vitamins." "Really?" "No," he said. "I only say that to justify my bad eating habits." "Did you or did you not order satellite radio for this car, Craig?" "I did, on Dad's home computer, because Mr. Harrigan didn't have one." "Then where is it?" "All I can get is that damn windbag Limbaugh." I showed him how to get to the XM radio. He turned the knob past 100 or so stations until he found one specialing in country. It was playing "Stand By Your Man." The song still gives me chills, and I suppose it always will. On that day, in my 11th year, as my dad and I sat drinking our Sprites and looking up at the big house, which was exactly what Harlowites called it, the big house, as if it were Shawshank prison, I said, "Getting snail mail is cool." Dad did his eye-roll thing. "Email is cool, and cellular phones. Those things seem like miracles to me. You're too young to understand. If you'd grown up with nothing but a party line and 4 other houses on it, including Miss Edelson, who never shut up, you might feel differently." When can I have a cell phone? This was a question I'd asked a lot that year, more frequently after the first iPhones went on sale. When I decide you're old enough. "Whatever, Dad." It was my turn to roll my eyes, which made him laugh. Then he grew serious. "Do you understand how rich John Harrigan is?" I shrugged. "I know he used to own Mills." "He owned a lot more than Mills. Until he retired, he was the grand high poobah of a company called Oak Enterprises. It owned a shopping centers, a chain of movie theaters, a telecom company. I don't know what all else. When it came to the big board, Oak was one of the biggest." "What's the big board?" "Stock market, gambling for rich people." When Harrigan sold out, the deal wasn't just in the business section of the New York Times. It was on the front page. "That guy who drives a 6-year-old Ford, lives at the end of a dirt road, pays you $5 an hour, and sends you a $1 scratch ticket 4 times a year is sitting on better than $1 billion. Dad grinned. "And my worst suit, the one your mother would make me give to the Goodwill if she was still alive, is better than the one he wears to church." I found all of this interesting, especially the idea that Mr. Harrigan, who didn't own a laptop or even a TV, had once owned a telecom company and movie theaters. I bet he never even went to the movies. He was what my dad called a Luddite, meaning, among other things, a guy who doesn't like gadgets. The satellite radio was an exception because he liked country music and hated all the ads on WOXO, which was one of the only CW stations on his car radio could pull in. "Do you know how much $1 billion is, Craig?" $100 million, right? Try 1,000 million. "Wow," I said, not only because a wow seemed called for. I understood $5, and I understood 500. The price of a used motor scooter on the deep cut road that I dreamed of owning. Good luck there. And I had a theoretical understanding of 5,000, which was about what my dad made each month as a salesman at Parmelo Tractors and Heavy Machinery in Gates Falls. Dad was always getting his picture on the wall as Salesman of the Month. He claimed that was no big deal, but I knew better. When he got Salesman of the Month, we went to dinner at Marcel's, the fancy fresh restaurant in Castle Rock. "Wow is right," Dad said, and toasted the big house on the hill, with all those rooms that went mostly unused and the elevator Mr. Harrigan loathed, but had to use because of his arthritis and sciatica. "Wow is about goddamn right." Before I tell you about the big money lottery ticket, and Mr. Harrigan dying, and the trouble I had with Kenny Yanko when I was a freshman at Gates Falls High, I should tell you about how I happened to go to work for Mr. Harrigan. It was because of church. Dad and I went to the First Methodist of Harlow, which was the only Methodist of Harlow. There used to be another church in town, the one the Baptists used, but it burned down in 1996. "Some people shoot off fireworks to celebrate the arrival of a new baby," Dad said. "I couldn't have been more than 4 then, but I remember it, probably because the fireworks interested me. Your mom and I said to hell with that and burned down a church to welcome you, Craigster, and what a lovely blaze it made." "Never say that," my mother said. "He might believe you and burn one down when he has a kid of his own." They joked a lot together, and I laughed even when I didn't get it. The 3 of us used to walk to church together, our boots crunching through the packed snow in winter, our good shoes puffing up dust in summer, which my mom would wipe off with Kleenex before we went inside. Me always holding Dad's hand on my left and Mom's on my right. She was a good mom. I still missed her bad in 2004 when I started working for Mr. Harrigan, although she had been 3 years then. been dead 3 years then. Now, 16 years later, I still miss her, although her face has faded in my memory and photos only refresh it a little. What that song says about motherless children is true. They have a hard time. I loved my dad, and we always got along fine, but that song was right on another point, too. There's so many things your daddy can't understand. Like making a daisy chain and putting it on your head in a big field behind our house and saying, today, you're not just any little boy. You're King Craig. Like being pleased, but not making it out to be a big deal, bragging and all, when you start reading Superman and Spider-Man comics books at the age of 3. Like getting in bed with you if you wake up in the middle of the night from a bad dream where Dr. Octopus is chasing you. Like hugging you and telling you it's okay when some bigger boy, Kenny Yanko, for instance, beats the living shit out of you. I could have used one of those hugs on that day. A mother hug on that day might have changed a lot. Never boasting about a precarious reader was a gift my parents gave me. The gift of learning early that having some talent doesn't make you better than the next fellow. But word got around, as it always does in small towns. When I was 8, Reverend Mooney asked me if I would like to read the Bible lesson on Family Sunday. It might have been the novelty of the thing that fetched him. Usually he got a high school boy or girl to do the honors. The reading from the book of Mark that Sunday, and after the service, the Rev said I'd done such a good job I could do it every week if I wanted. He says a little child shall lead them, I told Dad. It's in the book of Isaiah. My father grunted as if that didn't move him much. Then he nodded. Fine, as long as you remember you're the medium, not the message. Huh? Bible is the word of God, not the word of Craig, so don't get a big head about it. I said I wouldn't, and for the next 10 years, until I went off to college where I learned to smoke dope, drink beer, and chase girls, I read the weekly lesson. Even when things were at their very worst, I did that. The Rev would give me the scriptural reference a week in advance, chapter and verse, as the saying is. Then, at Methodist Youth Fellowship on Thursday night, I'd bring him a list of the words I couldn't pronounce. As a result, I may be the only person in the state of Maine who can not only... I can't pronounce that word. But spell it.